Welcome, friends. So I'd like to talk a little bit about supply and demand in a special market that we care a lot about, the labor market. So we've already done this a little bit because when I was talking about a price floor, we drew supply and demand and I said, here's the labor market. We'll talk about a special price floor called the minimum wage. So let's talk just a little bit more. So this idea is going to go along with section 4.1. There's a category about technology and how that affects the labor market. So we've already come across some concepts that say certain goods are complements and certain goods are substitutes. Well, those same ideas can also come into play when we're talking about something like how is technology going to affect the labor market? So if we think about a technological advancement, it could make it easier for workers to do their job and easier to do this stuff that workers are doing and making, and that ends up helping workers, and people who hire will want more workers. So some technologies are going to cause the demand curve for labor to shift out. Other labor is not a complement, it is a substitute. Other technological changes are substitutes for labor. So if you think about a machine that can harvest blueberries, that's a substitute for having people pick those blueberries by hand, right? So let's think about this real quick. We've got curves with price and quantity. Now let's talk about our market, and we've got the demand for labor. So we've got employers who are looking to hire workers, and the cheaper it is, the more people they're going to hire. And if it's really expensive to hire workers, they're not going to hire so many. We've got the supply of labor. This is all of us and other people who are potential workers, and if wages are really high, hey, we're going to work a lot. If wages are really low, might enjoy some leisure instead, right? So we've got an equilibrium in this market, so we've got a prevailing wage in this economy and a certain amount of work that gets done, number of hours worked, for example, maybe the number of workers in the economy, however we want to think about that. Well, let's think about this change to technology. Let's think about some workers who normally pick blueberries, and this machine is invented that can harvest blueberries off the blueberry bushes. What does that technological change do? Well, is that going to affect the supply of workers willing to work in this market? If you're thinking about people who are making the decision whether to go work or not, this isn't something that's changing that in a big way, right? What is it doing? It's changing the demand for workers, right? And what is it doing? That is an example of a substitute for normal workers. If this machine can pick the blueberries, we don't need quite as many people out there picking them by hand. So this sort of technological change is going to lower the demand curve. It's going to shift it in to the left. And so our new equilibrium is wages have gone down a little bit, and we don't have quite as many hours being worked in this market for, say, ag workers. Now, we could also think about some other workers on the farm. So not the people picking the blueberries, but maybe the workers who drive the trucks that go from the fields to the processor, the factory. Now, what is this technological change going to do for them? Well, if these machines that have been invented are really good at harvesting blueberries off the bush, then we're going to harvest more blueberries faster. We're going to need more truck drivers to drive those blueberries to the factory, right? So the opposite is going to happen if we're looking at not the market for pickers, but the market for truck drivers on those farms. So that same technological change in one market might shift the demand curve for labor in. In a different segment, a different market, it might actually shift the demand curve out. And so we see that with lots of technological changes. The biggest example, the most important one, is how computers and other sort of technology, information age sort of stuff can make some workers much more productive and kind of replace other workers. And so it all comes down to whether the technological change is going to be a complement for the workers and help them do what they do better, or is it going to be a substitute for the workers and replace them? So it's a big deal in the legal market right now. There are things like LegalZoom, other websites or companies or services that can get you legal services in a very different way than the traditional pay a retainer to a lawyer, pay them, they'll bill you per hour for the work they're going to do. For something like LegalZoom, it says, hey, we can make a contract for you for $80, or we can draft you a will for $150, or start a limited liability company for you for $220, or whatever the prices may be. They often have a flat fee to do it, and it's usually a lot cheaper than traditional lawyers could do it. How do they do that? Well, there's this technology that, there's a lot of smart contract sort of stuff, right? And other ways that computers have made it easier for one person who's good at law and at technology to make a whole bunch of final will and testament, or corporate filings, or contracts of various sorts. And so those technological changes, they may help the lawyers who are kind of tech savvy, but they may be replacing lawyers who would normally be doing that kind of work. So you see that with going through documents and seeing if they should be marked as confidential or not. If you have algorithms that can do that, then Google might be able to do that instead of hiring a bunch of lawyers to spend hours and hours doing it. So that's the idea, that in a special market, the labor market, we can have shifts in, say, the demand curve based on technology, and the demand curve may shift out or in depending on how that technological change is affecting the work that they do and kind of how companies are hiring the workers. So again, this corresponds to 4.1 in the book. Hopefully it is a helpful tool for thinking about some of the things you see around you, because there's actually a lot of this sort of stuff going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So a lot of work from home stuff, a lot of technological advances have been spurred by the pandemic, as the demand for work from home has really caused Zoom and other companies to scramble to hire a bunch of talent, to get new innovative products out there, get it scaled up really quickly. And so we've seen a lot of changes in workplaces just over the last 6 months. Meetings being held online instead of face-to-face, for example. That's done all the time now, and it used to be done, but not nearly as often as it is now. There are certain workers who are going to benefit from those changes, and other workers who might be hurt by those kind of changes, right? So we see this sort of thing happening all the time. Whenever there's a change in technology that affects how people do their job, we're going to tend to want to think about the different labor markets, not just one labor market, but think about kind of the different segments that are being affected in different ways. Because often there's effects that are very different for different workers. All right, thanks guys.